April 5th, 1531. The sky over London smothers the city in a pall of grey. Smithfield lies heavy with expectation, a place where cattle low and men have met their end. But today something new festers in the heart of the square. The crowd gathers early, their faces pale with anticipation and dread. The centerpiece is monstrous, a bronze cauldron wide and deep, resting atop a heap of burning wood. Flames snarl beneath it, spitting as water inside grows restless, hissing in the rising heat. A ripple of whispers spreads when the condemned is led forward. Richard Roose, a cook, a servant, a man who once moved unseen among the shadows of a bishop's house, is thrust before the multitudes. His hands are bound. His face is ashen, lips trembling as his eyes fix upon the steaming mouth of the cauldron. The stench of boiling fat is already in the air. He knows what waits, not the merciful swiftness of the axe, but the slow, savage dissolution of the self. Each inch of flesh flayed by boiling water, each nerve ending kindled in agony. Imagine it. The guards bind him tight, and every movement brings him closer to the cauldron's rim. The fire roars, greedy, licking the bronze with tongues of orange. In that moment, all that Roose ever was, a humble cook, a man with small joys and quiet disappointments, shrivels before the magnitude of public cruelty. Dignity is a memory, fear is everything. His eyes meet the faces in the crowd, some transfixed, some horrified, others thrilled by the promise of a pain so intimate it can only be witnessed, never shared. How did such a man come to this just weeks before England seethed with intrigue and suspicion? King Henry VIII's desire for a new wife has riven the kingdom. Bishop John Fisher, steadfast and incorruptible, stands against him, hounded by enemies, changing his chamber each night, wary even of his next meal. At Lambeth, Fisher's servants go about their duties, and among them Roose, unremarkable a shadow in the kitchens, unnoticed by all, until the moment the bishop's fears, once paranoia, now prophecy, became flesh. It happened on a winter's afternoon. The bishop's table was set for guests. Roose stirred the soup, the ordinary fare of Englishmen, but this day he added a powder he would later claim it was a jest, a purgative meant for harmless discomfort. But the bishop took only a little. Others, guests and beggars alike, emptied their bowls. What began as a meal ended in convulsion, pain, and death. Not all survived the night. Now, as the water in the cauldron roils, Richard Roose is forced to the edge. The guards seize him, lifting, lowering. His skin meets the surface with a hiss, a sound that silences even the bravest in the crowd. Boiling water claws at his legs. Flesh blisters, splits. He screams, a sound torn from the very core of terror. The crowd recoils, then leans in, drawn to the horror as moths to flame. The air is thick with steam, the stink of burning fat, the echo of agony bouncing from stone to stone. In these final moments, Roose is more than a man. He is the sum of every secret fear, every whispered threat that haunts the powerful. His suffering is both spectacle and warning, each fresh wave of pain a sermon on the price of betrayal, or of being simply in the wrong place at the wrong hour. And when silence finally falls, broken only by the pop and crackle of the dying fire, a single truth lingers in the air. There is no justice, only demonstration. The square is cleansed, but not of horror. The king's law is written in steam and blood, and beneath the skin of history the memory of burning endures, ready always to surface again. A man, a cook, once trusted, once ordinary, now stares into the yawning mouth of a cauldron, its black belly filled with churning water and the stench of burning fat. All around the crowd presses close faces, gleaming in torchlight breath, steaming on the frigid air, eager for the first scream. Richard Roose is dragged forward, limbs bruised and twisted from the rack. Not long before he had moved unnoticed, through the kitchen's, hands stained with onion and broth, his voice lost among servants. He remembers distantly how Bennet Kirwan and Alice Trippitt, two paupers, had gushed over their bowls of soup, grateful for scraps from a bishop's table. Hours later, agony twisted their bodies, death curling them into grotesque shapes. Rumor spread like a fever poison in the bishop's kitchen. The sanctity of the clergy breached the shadow of death creeping toward the king's own throne. Henry VIII, vast and furious, demands vengeance. The law is forged in fire and fear. Poison is no longer a crime, it is high treason. No jury, no mercy, no trial. Only the king's voice booming through Parliament and the hungry eyes of London waiting for a new spectacle. Roose is stripped. Iron chains bite his wrists and ankles, flesh already torn by torture. Soldiers shove him, and the heat rising from the cauldron burns his nostrils, fills his lungs with dread. The flames roar beneath a living beast. The water bubbles hissing and spitting like a curse. A priest mumbles a prayer unheard above the crackle of wood and the restless crowd. Roose meets their gaze, a wall of faces, pitiless, savoring his terror. The executioners seize him, force his body into the boiling water. Skin meets liquid and pain becomes a world. He screams a ragged animal sound. Flesh blisters, splits, slips from bone. The scent of cooked meat curls through the air, mixing with smoke and the sour tang of fear. His hands claw at the iron rim skin, sloughing away blood bright against black metal. Every nerve burns. The crowd gasps, recoils, some turn away, but most watch. The square echoes with his agony, each cry a testament to royal justice and its monstrous reach. Minutes stretch unbearable. Roose thrashes, eyes wide, mouth open in a soundless plea. His own body betrays him, cooked alive for the pleasure of vengeance, for the spectacle of power. At last, silence. What remains is steam, the ghost of a man rising with the heat and the lingering reek of death. This is not justice. This is monarchy as nightmare law, written in fire punishment, delivered in agony legacy, etched in the memory of the stones. Every king's word may become law, but every law in the end is written in flesh. Smithfield lies suffocated under a gray Tudor sky, the air thick with the stink of sweat, ale, and anticipation. The square seethes with bodies pressed close, eyes wide and hungry. Children perch atop crates. Vendors weave through the throng, hawking pies and cider, as if this were a fair and not the grotesque ending of a man. In the center, a massive bronze cauldron bubbles over a roaring fire, fat hissing and water rolling its heat, warping the air in trembling waves. Torches flicker against stone, their light dancing in the horror-struck eyes of the crowd. Richard Roose is dragged into view, half drunk. They say the last mercy he will ever know. He was once just a cook, a man of pots and spices, now stripped bare wrists, bruised by iron, his dignity peeled away before the mob. The king's justice hangs over him like a curse shadowed by rumor, conspiracy, and a terror of poison that reached all the way to Henry himself. Some say the king seeks to cleanse his court with spectacle, to drown whispers of Boleyn or Chapuis in boiling blood. The guards seize Roose and hoist him above the cauldron. Steam billows hot and fetid, licking his skin. A priest mutters a prayer, words swept aside by the crackle of fire and the swell of the crowd's breath. Then the moment he is plunged feet first into the churning water, the hiss of flesh meeting liquid is drowned by a scream so piercing it seems to shake the stone beneath their feet. Skin sloughs from his calves. The air is filled with the sweet, sickening stench of burning fat. Some in the crowd stagger, faces white, the boundaries of entertainment and hell collapsing before their eyes. He is lifted, limbs flailing, and then thrust deeper, the water once clear now a cloudy pink swirling with ribbons of dissolved flesh. His screams lose their shape, turn to hoarse gurgles, mouth yawning in agony as his chest hits the seething surface. The noise of the square grows monstrous, a single pulsing roar of fear and fascination. On the final immersion, Roose's entire body disappears beneath the roiling surface. His struggles slacken, bubbles rise, and the crowd falls into an awed, suffocating hush. Death, slow and merciless, releases him at last. The spectacle is complete. In the steam and gore, justice and cruelty become indistinguishable. Smithfield will not forget, nor will those who watched haunted by the memory of flesh boiled from bone by the knowledge that in Henry's England the line between power and terror is measured in pain and screams. The cauldron cools, the crowd drifts away, but beneath the stone the scent of Rose's suffering lingers, a monument to the savagery that masquerades as law. Smithfield, early Tudor England, a place now drowned beneath the noise of merchants and iron wheels, but once consecrated to fire and agony. Flames roar beneath a giant bronze cauldron, its belly bubbling with scalding water and the promise of flesh. The crowd presses in shivering in anticipation, faces lit by torchlight and the reflection of horror in one another's eyes. Guards hold the throng at bay, but no one turns away. All wait for justice, for the spectacle, for the sanctioned cruelty of the age. Margaret Davies, accused of poisoning, had felt the heat of this cauldron, her body broken and her cries devoured by the steam. Now Richard Roose is thrust forward, his wrists bound, his face twisted with dread, the stink of his own fear mingling with the sweet reek of boiling fat. His eyes dart, searching for mercy that does not exist. He knows every moment will be seen, measured, savored by the mob. He is stripped of humanity, reduced to a warning. He is lowered into the roiling water. For a heartbeat, the only sound is the hiss of flesh meeting heat. Then the square erupts with his howls, high, desperate, inhuman. The fire rages higher, feeding on his pain. Blisters bloom and burst. His skin sloughs from his body. The odor is unspeakable, a sickening marriage of burning fat, wet smoke, and the iron tang of blood. Torches flicker, reflected in the glistening cauldron, and the wide, astonished eyes of children pressed close to their mothers. Roose is conscious as his body cooks. He thrashes against the chain's muscles, seizing voice, shredded by agony. He feels himself unmade, piece by piece, flesh first, then hope, then the last trembling shards of selfhood. Every second is stretched upon the rack of suffering, every nerve a conduit for fire. The mob drinks in the sound of his screams, the spectacle of human dignity reduced to bubbling meat. And all the while the shadow of power hangs over the square. Henry VIII's justice is written not in law, but in fire and steam. The king remakes England as he pleases faith. Marriage, flesh itself, each life devoured by the furnace of his will. The deaths of others, John Fisher, his head rotting above the Thames. Anne Boleyn betrayed and beheaded. Even Henry rotting with paranoia and cruelty, are ghosts waiting in the wings. Now, centuries later, London rushes over Smithfield blind to what once transpired. The cobblestones remember what the world forgets, that beneath the city's heart men and women were boiled alive to feed the hunger of kings and crowds alike. Richard Roose's screams have faded, but the memory of cruelty persists, smoke trapped in stone, pain echoing through time. This is the truth of power, that justice and brutality were once indistinguishable, and beneath every law the cauldron waits. The market square at Smithfield broods beneath a slate-colored sky, the crowd thick and silent, drawn to the edge of cruelty by the promise of spectacle. Among them stands a man, Richard Roose, a cook by trade, now condemned to a death so monstrous that even the hardened faces of Henry's England struggle to meet his eyes. Guilt, innocence, or tragic mistake, these questions fade, swallowed by the shadow of the cauldron. The irony is obscene, a man who spent his life over bubbling pots, now forced to meet his end inside one. The cauldron, immense and black, gapes open its surface, writhing with foam and steam. The stench of burning fat creeps over the stones, crawling up the legs of the onlookers, sour and sweet and unforgettable. Guards hold Roose tight, their hands iron upon his flesh. Every muscle in his body recoils, yet he cannot escape the heat that radiates outward, eager, hungry. Torches flare. The fire beneath the iron womb roars, licking the cauldron's belly, making the liquid shudder and spit. The priest's voice is lost in the crackle and murmur of the mob. Some avert their eyes. Others lean forward, eyes reflecting the flickering orange hunger and horror mingling in their stares. Roose is forced upward, the iron of the scaffold cold beneath his bare feet. He looks down, sees the reflection of his own terror swirling in the cauldron's surface. For a heartbeat, he is not a criminal, but every man, fragile, desperate, impossibly aware of his own mortality. He opens his mouth, but the only sound is the fire, the chant of justice, the shuffle of boots on wet stone. Then the moment comes. Hands grip. He is lifted, dragged, hurled into the roiling vat. Boiling water closes over him. The scream tears from his throat, raw and animal, echoing off the city's ancient walls. Flesh blisters and peels. Blood bursts from beneath his skin. The crowd draws a collective breath, some recoiling, some devouring every detail. The air is thick with steam and agony, with the grotesque scent of human fat splattering against cold stone. Roose thrashes limbs, battering iron voice, rising and falling, a single note of terror in a choir of indifference. His skin slides away, his eyes turn skyward, searching for mercy that will not come. Death here is not a swift release, but a drawn-out erasure, a lesson written in pain. The square itself seems to hold its breath, watching the slow ritual dissolution of a man until silence falls at last. The fire gutters. The cauldron cools. Centuries pass. The market square is paved and buried beneath the rush of modern life. And yet beneath the hurried feet of Londoners, the stones remember. The line between order and savagery, between judge and executioner, is always thinner than we wish to believe. Justice, once corrupted, needs only a cauldron to become horror. Listen closely on a gray April morning, and you may yet hear the echo, the desperate scream of a cook, discovering in fire and agony what it means to be on the other side of the pot.